Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. It is good to be here. Thank you for tuning in. Today we have our boy Sammy on, and he is an educator and he has an awesome perspective when it comes to thinking about the power sharing between himself as the educator, the students, as well as connecting with the communities to make better leaders and people who can question everything that is going on. So very, very transferable skills, I guess, across the sector. So please share this one with everyone you know. Give us a 5-star rating if you are on iTunes, and even give us a little cheeky comment if you can. Outside of that, join us on the Facebook group, and please enjoy this episode with our boy Sammy as he talks about his perspectives through education.
Give it.
Sweet. Yeah. Right. I think there's too much muscle on this couch right now.
Struggling.
Nah, this is good. Yeah, it would just be like a catch up.
Yeah.
We just feel like, but honestly, when I came and saw you before, I was like, far out. This actually just feels like we're catching up.
Yeah.
But I'd never met you before.
Yeah.
Like, I'd seen you around, obviously, but
yeah.
Until then, I was just like, man, we like have so much more in common.
Yeah. I think once you find that common space, like especially people first, like obviously experiences is second, and then when you can identify that you both can come from the same similar kind of whakapapa as well, like from the same waka, it's just connect. It just aligns, eh?
Absolutely. So, yeah. I mean, because we obviously grew up in different islands as well, but then also like in Invercargill for me, until I had gone down to Dunedin, I just told you before, that was the first time I ever heard the like and like people with accents and stuff. But you actually, that was like your upbringing.
Yeah, that was normal to us, and it was just weird. Like when I went to uni and people actually pointed it out, whereas in Invercargill it would just. It's normal, you know, and people wouldn't say anything like, "Oh, you roll your R's are all ugly" or anything like that. It was when I met my partner actually, and she was like, "Ew, that's an ugly accent." Yeah. And actually, when I first met Melania, she would always hold that against me. As when I first met her at St. Margaret's, and I said, "G'day, mate." Yeah. Which is like in the South, like that's a normal thing to say when you see someone, like, "Hey, g'day, mate," and then she was like, "What? I'm from South Auckland. We don't know that. Like, it's not normal to us." Yeah. And so that's the unique part of having that accent down there, and then just obviously coming to a different place in this country where it's completely different. You know. Yeah. Different set of people, different values as well, different priorities, and also just different sounds and accents as well. Yeah.
And so, what actually ended up? So, because your parents came over from Samoa to New Zealand, how is it that you ended up in Invers?
Well, because when my parents first came to New Zealand, they came over in the 60s, 70s. Sure. And so in that era, it was quite big with seasonal work, fruit picking and laundry, you know, factories were quite a big thing. So Mum and Dad came to work here in Wellington, and Dad lived here in Lyall Bay area, and Mum lived in Wainui. And then eventually they moved down south, and that's where Dad got the opportunity as an oyster shucker.
Sure.
And then Mum was a stay-at-home mum, obviously taking care of my older sister, and then ended up having us as well. Right. And so that's how they ended up down there. But obviously they connected with the community down there who were there for the same, you know, kaupapa as well. Yeah. With seasonal work and just whatever opportunities were available to give back to the family in the islands.
Sure, because it's interesting to hear that, because I always would just assume from all of the people that I've met from like Invers, from Gore, from like all of those Southland kind of areas, I'd always just assume that it's like predominantly Pākehā. Yeah. But like to hear you say that they actually had communities down there, like that's kind of different from what a lot of people would kind of see them as, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, everyone automatically assumes South Island like sheep, you know, farmers, and don't get me wrong, there are a lot of them, but in the city of each of those regions, it's, you know, it's got a lot of our community in there who are obviously there for opportunities as well. And you know, you talk to any one of them and they'll talk about, oh yeah, the purpose of coming to here was, we're here to get jobs to send money back home, but we're also here to plant the seed for our kids in their future as well, for better opportunities in education and life as well. Yeah. Probably the big thing is that, you know, when you go down south, just a lot of the kids just moving away and forgetting that purpose as well. Right. And so I think that's probably the bigger challenge as the second and third generation coming through, is that they start to lose sight and lose touch of what their grandparents or their parents or their great-grandparents who moved over, their original purpose. But slowly but surely it's starting to come back full circle now, which is awesome.
And when you were going through high school, did you kind of have that in the back of your mind as like, I could hopefully get into something where I can start providing for my family, or was that more just like I'm just going through the motions at this stage?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because in 2011, so I would have been year 11 at the time, in my science class, our science teacher asked us, "Oh yeah, we're going to go around the class," because we just had Careers Expo.
Sure.
Oh yeah, we're going to, and people are going to talk about what they want to do in the future, and everyone said, "Oh yeah, I want to do this. I want to go do this. I want to own my own mechanics and blah blah blah." And then it came to my turn, and I said, "Oh, I want to go to university and study."
Yeah.
Like it wasn't specific or anything.
Yeah.
It was just I wanted to go university, obviously to give back to the family. But then one of the other boys piped up in the class and said, "Oh, the only university you're going to is Matoda University, which is the meatworks, where all our people go. You know, stereotypically, and for me, I think that was probably the biggest motivating factor, was to prove that wrong, but also B, to give back to family as well, obviously financially, and they still support me to this day. My 5 sisters, so I'm really grateful and thankful for them, and also my parents who have both passed away, but can't forget the hard work that they did for all of us as well.
Sure.
But yeah, obviously to give back and to obviously serve our family and serve our community, serve our people as well. I mean, you all know, with the current position that I'm in, and giving back to our youth who, it's like a mirror to them, when they see someone like them standing at the front, oh, e te rangatira, or, or someone of arikitanga status, it's like them as well. Yeah. But no, that's kind of been the biggest driver, going forward in times past. And now here we are.
Yeah,
10 years later.
Here we are. and it is good to be here. But I just, going back to, there's a few things that I need to pick out of that. But the first one is really that, the stereotype that does come up, and that it is, like, it is sad to see a lot of people who don't have that drive or don't have that purpose, who do end up seeing that, they start believing what everyone else is saying about them. They're like, oh, no, you will only just go to the meatworks, or like, you can't do any of that. Like, how was it that what was it, that purpose in you that made you see that, like, you can't fall into that stereotype or into that trap that everyone kind of wants you to go down?
Yeah, that's a really good question and a really good point you raised, because I think there are two main factors. I think the first one was year 11. I had a bit of a play up year in year 11, too many of out of class distractions.
Yep, right.
And then my dad actually pulled me up one day, and he grabbed an oyster knife, and he grabbed me by the scruff of the neck, and he goes, "You see this? This is where you're going to end up if you don't get your A into G." And then from that moment forth, I was like, okay, I need to do my schoolwork right. So I don't want to end up like an oyster shucker. I don't want to end up at the freezing works or anything like that. I want to end up in a better position for my family. And then the second one was more so mum. I'm a big mama's boy. As a lot of us PI boys are, and
for sure.
And she would always say, you're the only one out of you siblings that carry your father's name, your family name, because when the sisters get married, they'll either hyphenate their name or they'll change their surname. Whereas for me, I'll always have my name. And so she kind of made reference to, like, the mountains, you can only go up and keep going. You can't go up to the top now, do really well now, and then drop, So, she said once you get to the top, you just keep striving, and don't bring that name down. And those two were motivation, really big motivating factors for me anyway, to try and just be better. Yeah.
And seeing that and just knowing that, because where you are now, like we said, when you're in that point, that's the last thing you can think about. The last thing you think about is you, like, 10 years from now, where would I be? But, like, if you were to look back now, like, I would definitely say that you are still climbing that mountain, and you're still, like, getting to different peaks, taking a look at where you've gone, and then going up again to keep reaching different things. But when you were at high school and then choosing to go to uni because that was your goal, how was it in your mind that you're just like, okay, this is what I'm going to do? Like, this is the career path that I'm going to do to uphold that name?
Well, to be honest, like, I was one of those boys in high school who were either academic or sport jock.
Sure.
And so, like, I was tossing up between if I wanted to chase the rugby path or if I wanted to go university. And I guess the biggest thing was it was quite unsettling. Yeah. And I think I liked that. Like, I liked that it was uncomfortable to have to decide, okay, I've got until the day where we have to meet at St. Margaret's on that Sunday before O Week starts to decide if I'm really going to go through with it.
Sure.
Tick the boxes in school, get your UE, get your NCA level 3, get your scholarships and stuff like that. But then actually having that month to really mentally prepare. Yeah. And I think that really helped as well. And so, like, it was unsettling at first, but then it got to the point where I just said, nah, I have to do it, and I have to go through it. And I couldn't have made the decision without my parents and my siblings as well. Sure. I had an older sister who studied as well, and she was studying actually when I was studying, and she graduated in 2015 doing teaching as well. Yep. But she was kind of like my role model growing up. and she was the predecessor, and she was leading by example, setting the pathway for me to follow, or us younger siblings to follow. And so I credit a lot of that decision to actually go, yep, I'm sticking with it.
Right.
Yeah.
And because you had seen, you like had a role model of someone who'd gone through it before. Because it's kind of like, that's what makes you feel safer, is that you know that someone who was like you has gone through, like when you were talking about before with like, when people come into your classroom and they see you, like someone that's like, well, I can be that.
Yeah.
Like that's someone, so like you've had someone go before you. I was just wondering, because like, when our grandparents come over, or like when parents come over from the islands, and this is like what they're trying to do, they'll never tell you about like how scary it is. They'll like, it's, you just take it for granted that they're doing it all. But had she ever like talked to you about her experiences coming through?
Yeah, it's a really good point, because she would never talk about it, but she'd always say, "Oh, just keep trying, just keep trying."
Yeah,
never a mention of any struggle or anything. It got to a point where I was like, I was quite arrogant, because I was in school and I was doing really well in school, but then comparing like my school marks to her school marks, and then that comparison was quite hurtful for her,
right?
And it got to a point where she just broke down and said, "Hey, it's not easy. Things are not as easy as they come across. Just because I'm ticking the boxes and getting through doesn't mean that I'm doing it easily." And I think that was a really good example, for someone who was preparing to leave home, the first one to leave home to go study. It was a really good lesson for me at a young age to just be able to be like, okay, the next part is not going to be easy. There will be highs, there'll be lows, but at the end of the day, we've got to get to that final destination. It's not how fast you finish the race or anything. You've just got to get to the finish line. Yeah. And she really taught me that. Yeah.
And then when you did end up at university, like so now you're aware that like it can be difficult, and there's a lot of different obstacles really that you have to go through. You have to leave home. You have to get used to a new environment, but like Dunedin is something else, like the life that happens down there. So when you did move down, like what was the transition period like for you?
I think for me, it was very much like home. Yeah. Like, I think geographically it was very much like home, because, it was 2.5 hours driving the car. But I think just the culture, the shift was huge, like I think it was more diverse than what I was used to growing up. But also just the student culture as well, pretty rowdy. And I think I spent the whole first of semester just trying to find my bearings, like find where I was. I didn't drink, I didn't go out, like I played rugby and then came back home and slept, and then like that was that. But then I think by the time second semester hit and Rio week came along, like I knew where I was, and it was. It's kind of funny about the saying, that take your place in the world. That's when I started to take my place in the world. It was like, okay, now I know where I am. I'm here at Otago. I'm here studying this. I'm here. I know these people. I get along with these people. I know these are my lecturers. I know I'm studying this. But that took a whole semester. For some kids, with RA and some master experience, for some kids it takes them a whole year or 2 years or 3 years to find who they are and where they are and what they want to do. And so I think I was really lucky and fortunate in that regard to have that transition period where it was a semester of experimenting, of going to class, of, going to tutorials, handing in assignments, getting into that routine. And then second semester came along and then bam, straight into it. Yeah. But then those lows that I was talking about earlier started to creep in second year, end of first year, second year. Sure. And then at the end of second year, when I got a talking to from, Tofi Lau. Of course. Yeah, Tofi Lau Nina, God bless her. She told me, what do you want to do? And I said, I was thinking I might do the Masters of Teaching program. And she said, I don't think they'll accept you with these kind of grades and with these kind of habits and with this kind of, in Samoa we call it the word like amio, is like the way you hold yourself. Sure. And she obviously seen that, I'd slipped from where I was promising at the end of school. First year was okay, and then second year just dropped, and I think for me that was the wake up call. And then third year came along, and then it just slowly started to get better over time. But no, I credit a lot of it to her as well. Just like giving you that wake up call. Yeah. She was very much like a mentor. I think a lot of kids fear her. Like, you will know yourself. And a lot of kids almost fearful of the PI centre. But it's definitely a home away from home for a lot of them. But it's more so just accepting that it is the home away from home. That was definitely my struggle. But then once it became my home away from home and I accepted that, I was in there every day having a coffee, helping myself to the bread and making toast. And it was really good. Christine and Nina and Erica are an awesome team. Absolutely. No, they're still holding it down now. But it's the same thing. Like you always,
it's the people who are going to make you feel the most uncomfortable at some point who actually help you with that growth, because you can just get so caught up in like being like, I'm doing well, like nothing's going too bad, but until someone looks at you and actually sees what you're properly capable of, and then just being like, is this all you want?
Totally.
And you're like, oh yeah, okay. I should probably do something.
I think it's so true though, because for me, you know, like us as university students, when we were doing it, we're like, oh yeah, tick that assignment off, get that grade, yeah, whatever. You know, C's, get degrees. But then not realizing that people are actually watching.
For sure.
You know, people are watching your progress, and she was one of those people who were on my, like, watching from afar, and then when she did get a chance to snap me, she let loose, you know, and I was like, this is the first time I've seen her this year. Yeah. And not even a hello, but just a, hey, what's going on, you know? And on the outside the Commerce building as well. So I was like, oh, not even private, but all good. You know, it was the lesson that needed to be taught in that moment as well. So yeah, no, really good.
And after that, what were some things that you were like, because you started noticing then, you're just like, okay, my habits probably aren't the best. What were some things that you started to do for your third year going into it that like helped you feel like you got back on track?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, because I think the organisational stuff is really important. You know, in first and second year, it's really easy to get caught up in the life. You know, go to the Octagon and do whatever, get crazy, play rugby, do all that stuff, starters bar on a Thursday. But then I think third year, I started to organise my stuff. So like I started to have like a calendar. You know, students get given calendars, you know, from first year in O week, they get given calendars. But just the fact that I didn't personally make the most of it, you know, knowing when assignments were due and things like that. So third year, I started to organise my assignments, and I had this really bad habit of handing in assignments a week early. Sure. And so like I wouldn't even make the most of that week to try and fine tune it. I'll just be like, do it, get it out of the way, you know? Whereas in first and second year, I was like, do it right up to the point, the minute that it's due, you know? But yeah, doing it and getting out of the way, it was kind of put me at ease. Sure. Like, cool, now I can prepare, I'm ahead of the game for the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And then I realized the grades were getting better and better. And I was like, oh, this is actually a pretty good routine, you know? And then it just translated into my Masters of Teaching as well. Nice. Where I was doing assignments earlier, getting the feedback, getting it in early, and just staying ahead of the game, because in teaching it's really important to be ahead of the game. If you're not at least a lesson or two ahead of where the kids are at the moment, then it's going to come back to bite you. For sure.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where you don't have like a stable foundation to kind of do something like spectacular. You just kind of can only plan a lesson that's just enough, and you're just like, oh, what if I did this? What if I did that? And for you going into the Masters of Teaching, was there anything in particular that you're like, this is what I want to go and teach, or did you just kind of want to do it and then see what ended up being your area?
Yeah, I think I always knew I was going to do music and social studies, because those were my areas I'd studied in undergrad. Sure. But then in terms of the context of what I'd be teaching, I was pretty mainstream. Like obviously in New Zealand, we educated in a very mainstream system here, where it's very Eurocentric and very Caucasian, so to speak, and very, just Western.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think for me, when I was doing that teaching course, it kind of taught me that as much as they were lecturing to us about the need for change, they weren't giving us any tools to go towards that change. And so that kind of growth didn't start till I started teaching here in Wellington, at Scots College. And that's when I realised, still the same thing, 90% Pākehā, 10% Pacific, but we shouldn't worry about the mainstream. We should worry about making sure it's equitable, So get these guys up to the standard where they match them, and almost push them as well. It's not just a given, the Pākehā or the Asian or the Indian are going to do really well. It's actually, we're right across the board. We've got options. And so the context became really important. Teaching from a Pacific lens, teaching from a tangata whenua lens as well, is really important to acknowledge that side of Aotearoa. But it's just amazing how much authentic learning can take place. Sure. When you start to link into the context of the kids,
Absolutely.
Understand their homes, understand their family story, understand their own individual story, understand the community story in New Zealand, and for some of them, they might have the story linking to dawn raids or whatever. But yeah, I think that's really important, and that's where the context started to help influence what I was actually wanting to teach, the area I wanted to go in. Right. And so like with music, for example, we're not just teaching about Western, art music. We're teaching about music from pre-missionary times in Samoa, pre-missionary times in the Pacific, before the Westerners arrived with their missionary, the Christianizing of what the Pacific was at the time, and then they're actually having an influence on music, the way music is perceived and performed, and what people might say is, we've got to be classical to be good musicians.
Sure.
But, it's kind of like a exclusive kind of hierarchy kind of way to portray music. But actually, music is supposed to be about community.
Absolutely.
And same for performing arts as well. A lot of the stuff that we see now and the way it's performed and portrayed now is different to what it was initially for, what the original purpose and function and intention was of that art. And then the same goes for the social sciences as well. Understanding community, understanding push and pull factors, understanding, politics and governance. It wasn't always about democracy.
For sure.
Everyone always up in arms about democracy, which is obviously important 21st century. But in terms of who we are as a people before then, we've still got the Mate system, the chief system, where it is the one ariki at the top, you've got your one rangatira there, and then you've got his advisors or his council who are, and then you've got his mouthpieces who are his orators.
The orators,
And then you've got the people who are untitled, men and women who are serving those people as well. And so everyone, there's a Samoan saying o Samoa wa umana tofi, o se atunuu wa umana tofi, so meaning everyone in Samoa has their place, has their order that they are serving or working towards. It's not like in this capitalist society where it's you work your way to the top.
Absolutely.
This year you're on this salary, and then the next year you might get a performance increment, and then over there it's if you're an orator, you're an orator for life. If you're a high chief, you're a high chief for life until the day you die. If you're an untitled, you can progress from being untitled to titled, but that comes through years of service. I think that's a really important founding value, especially in teaching as well. It's a really important value to carry with us, that we are servants. We serve the kids, we serve their families, and it's not about us being experts or anything as well.
It's like everything that you do is it doesn't matter what you're doing, but as long as you're doing it to serve everyone else, rather than just I'm doing this so that hopefully someone sees what I'm doing and promotes me. If I do this, these people can then eat more, or we can all get education, or everything that, and then that's when we think about all of our ancestors, all of their journeys were not for themselves. They were thinking generations ahead of everything. So that's when that whole service comes in. And you were talking about it before with the experts and who we consider experts. So I think when we were coming through school, we always saw the teacher was the expert. But having a little bit of a discussion with you now, it seems that the expert from your eyes, actually you're in there as the servant to help these kids become their own experts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally. And not only them becoming their own experts, but also trusting the word of their parents and their families as well, that they too are holders of knowledge and wealth, and also cultural capital as well. I think a lot of kids they get a bit whakamau as soon as you say, bring mum and dad to a rehearsal, or bring them along and we can have a chat, and they get a bit shy, nah, because of the fear that's been instilled in them by Western society. Just about that is, you are not the expert, you are not the knowledgeable one. You come to school to become knowledgeable because the people who are knowledgeable are the ones standing in front of you. And I'm really against that, and I think it's really important that we give opportunities for kids to realize, actually, you can become experts as well. We aren't experts. We're here to serve you to become the expert in your area, whatever area of life it is that you choose to follow. I think, especially in Aotearoa, New Zealand, there's that whole focus on the Western society pushes out STEM. We need more STEM focused people, scientists. We need more engineers. We need more mathematicians. We need more people working at stats. We need more people working at our banks and watching finances and watching our economy. That's fine, but we also need people to be critical thinkers.
Sure.
And I think that's what's missing, is that where art comes in. They are critical thinkers. It's more than a picture. It's more than a song. It's much deeper than a poem. It's much deeper than a play or a performance. It's much bigger. There's a bigger meaning to something than a play that goes for half an hour. It's not just like Shakespeare wrote something and then it was awesome. He wrote something, but what makes it awesome over time is that people's interpretations of what he's saying are different. And that's the beauty of someone like Shakespeare. So hats off to that guy. But our own people are just as artsy, and just as creative, just as intelligent, and just as as capable of being experts in their own way.
And it's just ways of expressing like what was important then, but then the same values are still shown, but they're just kind of shown in a different way because the context has changed slightly.
Totally.
Yeah. And just coming back to what you were saying before, like how people are thinking critically now, like that kind of has to be the secret sauce to everything we do, because we've seen what happens with like COVID and all that sort of stuff, that if you were only a specialist and that was all you knew, if you didn't have the ability to think critically about everything that you're going to go through, like you may be out of a job right now. So that whole critical analysis, and I do want to get into the artsy side of things, because that is beautiful, like all of that stuff, and just being able to think about it, especially being like maybe our age and like younger, and what you would call, I guess, a stereotypical male, right?
Yeah.
And that artsy side is something that's just nah, we don't get into that. But what was it about, the arts that kind of made you feel like, no, this would be awesome to get people involved with it?
I think it's a really good question, first thing, but I think for me it clicked. It made me think back to when I was in school, when we'd do poly in Invercargill, and just the fear factor, like, oh, nah, we don't want to, oh, too cool, like, oh, nah. But then I realized that it's about identity more than what looks cool or what's trendy as well. Obviously now we've got a lot more people engaged in performing arts through TikTok as well, which is
true.
Amazing, bro.
Yeah.
And now it's even opened up pathways for kids in school as well. But going back to that, growing up, it was perceived like, oh, nah, alpha males don't do that. Like, nah, we just play rugby for the first 15 and then go to parties on the weekend and then come back to school and do things half-assed in class. But then it kind of taught me that actually nothing beats your culture. You can't put anything higher than your culture and your identity. And even now, just seeing the number of kids who are really keen on being part in poly. I mean, Bishop Viard College, where I teach now, 247 kids we had at school last year. And out of 247, we had 84 kids perform in our poly group.
Far out.
And so obviously with COVID, Fear Night was our only option. So no, there was no North City Polyfest where the schools would perform in different cultural groups. But at our school, our solution was to have an evening of entertainment per se, where the kids would learn all different cultures and perform it together. And it was awesome. So we had 84 kids, and for a school our size, it's nearly a third of our school.
Absolutely.
If not. And I think moving forward, that's definitely something that we're going to try and carry on, especially with the performing arts anyway, like to keep it alive. I mean, we're offering performing arts as a subject at school now, where it's more than just learning dances. It's more than just learning sequences of dance movements, but more so learning the purpose, doing the critical thinking, but in that setting, in that context. Because then we'll do the same for music as well. We'll do theory. We'll listen to songs from different cultures. We'll do our practical side. We'll compose and write songs. But then it's the deeper level of thinking that we want them to get to. And I guess if the rest of the education sector is starting to move towards that direction, I think it's going to be better, not only just for performing arts and music, but also just society in general. If we can teach people to be more critical thinkers. And then obviously not spit them out of school, but like once they leave school and graduate school, they can go into university knowing that the level of critical thinking needed to be there is definitely what they're capable of. It's not just like back in our day. I'm not sure what it was like for you at school here in Wellington, but in Invercargill, it was like they taught you to a point, and then they said, oh, university will be all good. You go to university, it's just completely different ball game. Whereas now it's like, okay, the kids are starting to become more critical of things. They start to question more, not only in class, but at rehearsals as well. They'll ask, oh, why are we doing that action? Isn't this what the word means? And, so they go to that depth. And once they go to that depth, then we're definitely on track with kind of lifting the profile of performing arts.
For sure, and it kind of changes the whole, because we were always kind of like, you just do what you're told, and if you like question it, you're a troublesome child. But there's sometimes you do need to question those things. Otherwise, like all of these different things that we just continue to like reestablish, and it could be the reason why we're still stereotyped or why we're still in a particular way. If we have that sort of way about us, but being able to do it respectfully, obviously, like there is room for us to grow. Because like with I think in the education curriculum, it's like ako, which is like to teach and to learn. So there is wiggle room for like a bit of someone to say, oh, look, hey, this should be done this way. And then you can change things from there. And that's kind of your role being the educator now. And as someone who was part of teaching the curriculum, do you get that space to be able to like, okay, this is what the curriculum wants, but this is how we're going to deliver it?
Yeah, I think that's really cool, because there is that, the curriculum that we've been given as teachers, and then there's our interpretation of that. But for me, it's not about our interpretation.
Sure.
It's about the kids' interpretation of what's expected of them.
Right.
And that's where we can have a lot of the, the kids, they grow up, like you said, in that environment. Like I did too, in the church, in the Samoan church. And growing up, you feared your youth leaders, you feared your elders, you feared the minister, you feared your parents. But in our education setting, just trying to normalize that, hey, it's okay to question. Like it's fine. It's fine to say, hey, I don't understand this, or is it okay if we look at this a bit more? Or, just get their voice. Student voice is really important, and agency. And like you said, that akonga is really cool, because, with the akonga, it's about reciprocity, eh?
For sure.
And our community is based on reciprocity. What you give is what you get back tenfold. And blessing. It might not be in materials, but it'll be in some blessing of some sort. And I know in Samoan culture, it's a lot about the reciprocity.
For sure.
You give not to receive. You don't expect to receive. You just give, and then what is given back to you is like blessings tenfold.
Absolutely.
And it's the same in that, you've got that room to share, you're face to face, and then also that heart to heart, respecting each other's sacred space as well, but also just being able to be like, oh, actually, you can fix me, and I can fix you as well. Because no one's perfect, right?
Absolutely.
And I think that links together with the expert saying, we were talking about before, how, people just perceive us to be experts, but no way, we are just the middle person of what the Ministry of Education are wanting for their kids to achieve.
Sure.
We're just that middle person and trying to be a catalyst to bring them together. But actually it's much deeper than that, eh? It's not just ministry, us, kids, it's ministry, us. It should be kids at the middle,
right? And
then actually the kids should be ahead of the ministry, because the ministry are using the kids to inform what they want and want to achieve, and then we are the servants on the ground, the ground dogs, and then we link together with the communities. Actually, how can we work towards making sure our kids get to the top? And that's where you get that feedback, that akonga, and also whanaungatanga as well, and also like, probably teaching kids that education's not there to just be sitting in the classroom and get the grades, but actually you're there to be kaitiaki as well. For sure. Of your family, of your families, and of your different environments, wherever it is that you end up. You know that you've experienced something really good, and that you've got really good founding values and core values to you as well. So I think it's deeper than just curriculum on paper, because man, some of the lessons are the best, are the life lessons,
Absolutely.
And the grillings and the telling offs, and even vice versa. Sometimes the kids will tell us off. Like, we've had a few interventions in my school where the kids have been like, oh, mister, because I can be black and white, and I think it's really important to be black and white. Some of the kids, they don't like the black area. Sure. They might not like the white area. And so they might say, oh, can you just tone down a bit on this, or can you lift up a bit more on this, and just letting them express that, not in any scripted way, but just letting them just openly say, hey, mister, like, we really appreciate you, we respect you, but we'd really like it if you said this a bit more, right? If you didn't do this as much, and then respecting that by answering back and going, cool, I apologize, refresh and renew that sacred space and relationship you had with them, letting them inform your practice, eh?
Yeah, for sure.
So that you can make it more effective, what the curriculum that you're trying to teach out to them, eh?
Yeah, because that used to be the thing, man. If you tried to say that back in the day, man, you were too loud. That's what it was. It's just like, oh, you think you know everything.
Yeah, you
want
think
to teach
okay.
But that was that's because then you help them kind of field through different spaces, and one of the things in that they learn without even knowing it is like conflict resolution, being able to like approach confrontation, because confrontation is something that a lot of us are really bad at, because we never got to a point of questioning things, because we were always like told not to question things. And now these people, like, how old will most of them be? Like, none of them are younger, or none of them are older than 18, so they're all in those like formative stages of trying to figure out who they are as well. And if they are able to talk to the teacher, who we've always seen as like, this is the don't ever talk back to your teacher. If they can have that conversation and that dialogue with you, then they should be like better in most contexts.
Oh, totally. And I guess that's what the ultimate objective is.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's not going to happen overnight, but over time, you would have had a few generations of kids come through your classroom. You know, by the time we turn 40, you know, we would have had 15 or 16, 17 generations of year 13 students who would have gone through schools. But you want to have that lasting impact on them where they can leave and go, actually, I learned this from this guy.
Sure.
You know, I might not have learned much music or much about performing arts or much about history, but I actually learned how to deal with people.
100%.
You know? Or I learned how to talk to people.
Yeah.
Or, you know, there's still that, like you said, formative stages, and, you know, a lot of them are real iffy about, you know, gender. You know, like boys talking to girls, they don't really talk, you know, they don't really get along because they're too, like, scared of the perception from their mates. Oh, you're trying to, you know? But really, now we want that to kind of be changed, and we want them to actually normalize talking to that person.
Absolutely.
You know? In the future, that might be the accountant that you might go to. That might be the lawyer that you use. That might be the Prime Minister of New Zealand, you know, and just normalizing that networking from a young age, so that when they do leave school, they're more than ready to take on life.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even normalizing some of the things like with struggle and when things aren't really working for them as well. And how do we voice that so that it doesn't get to a point where you're like having to turn to other vices where like we can just use our words first or some sort of expression. That's what I've always found with like music and stuff. Not that I ever studied it, but that's what I always found was like music was an outlet for a lot of people to like be able to properly voice what they could never tell anyone.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, you're totally right, because with the, you know, mental health, it's always been an issue, right? But it's just becoming more and more of a prominent and more public issue now.
Absolutely.
You know, people have always suffered mental illness, you know, and now it's just starting to come to light. And I think music is really important, and performing arts as well. For sure. But also, like, people might be authors, you know, and people might be historians and suffer the same issues, or physicians, or like doctors, and will go through mental health issues, but more so learning the skills on how to not heal themselves, but just how to deal with it. For sure. You know, and how to adapt to situations. I think there's that saying is that, you know, a person doesn't sink to the level of their training, but they rise to the, you know, they rise to the occasion. Or the other way around.
That's the one.
Yeah. It's they don't they don't rise to the occasion. They sink to the level of their training and how hard it was. And for some of them, their training was home. Sure. You know, broken family. You know, it might be gang life. It might be having to do, you know, dealings for mum and dad. It might be domestic violence. It might be alcohol. You know, it might be other issues. But that's the training that those kids have experienced. And in terms of dealing with their mental illness, I think we do try and portray, hey, don't think that you have to write music like Beethoven or Mozart or anyone else. Just write whatever's comfortable for you. Yep. You know, I had one of these Tongan boys who was a student of mine who at first started handing in assignments like that sounded a bit like Bach and Handel, who were Baroque composers. And I was like, this is not reflective of a 17-year-old Tongan boy in Wellington who's grown up in the church and, you know, and is really into hip-hop and loves his culture. And, you know, I want to hear something that's about you. Right. You know? And then that's when he started going from that classical composition to more writing about in his language. Yeah. You know, writing, you know, songs about his life. Yeah. You know, coming from Tonga and coming here and being raised in the church here and having just been not ditched, but being expected to just do well. Sure. You know, because his parents had it all for him. And that's been an awesome thing to kind of see someone, I'm going to deal with my issues this way. You know, I'm going to write songs this way. And it's not like, you know, depressing songs. Yeah. Not that depression is a really, really bad thing for some people, but more so how he dealt with it. Absolutely. You know, with that struggle. Absolutely. You know, no, hardly any family, no parents, and living and boarding at a school that is predominantly Pākehā, you know, and just how he dealt with that. And I think that's awesome. Yeah. And I also think that with a lot of artists these days, that is the number one. Absolutely. You know, if there's a box that they're going to tick, it's not going to be about relationships. Yeah. It's going to be about how they went through struggle, you know, and how they dealt with it as well. Yeah.
That's so cool, man. And I think the opportunity for someone to speak in a language that is comfortable for them as well, because maybe some people, I know there's that saying about things being lost in translation, and that's always true. Like when you look at the English translations of whatever the Indigenous language was, there is so much meaning in like less words, but we just can't explain it in English. So sometimes there's a feeling that comes with the different words that you're putting together, but perhaps it doesn't come across in English.
Yeah.
So you're allowing those people that opportunity to be able to get into that. And just for yourself as like the educator, and a lot of the identity side you were talking about before, you know, that kind of, it's a difficult thing for a lot of people who are still like trying to figure their identity out. And that's something that we were talking about earlier, where with your language journey to be able to speak Samoan, that was part of your journey of becoming like who you are now and all of those different things, and that probably helps with your teachings. When did that become like an integral part of your upbringing?
Yeah, that's an awesome kind of topic to bring up, because it kind of relates to everything that we've just been talking about, you know, and I think without the culture and the identity of someone, knowing their culture and where they stand, their tūranga waiwai, no idea, you know, they'll be so lost. And so for me, it kind of began at home, obviously with parents and my siblings. But whenever my parents spoke Samoan to us, you know, it was always respond in English. Yeah. And we didn't think that was a bad thing. Like we grew up, like our parents never corrected us. You know, they never said, "Hey, so we had a talk, you know, talk in Samoan to us." There was none of that. Right. It was more so, you know, and then we just go, "Oh, okay, yeah." And then go do it, you know? Right. And I think that's not just a Samoan thing, but that's across the board, you know? And then, even through school, like there was still that struggle with trying to learn the language. We weren't actively trying to learn the language, still understood it, and then got to university. And that's when I met some of my boys at university. And yeah, so we've got a little group of us called the Five Clyde Radio Boys. So the boys used to live on Five Clyde, and it was always funny. Every time we got together, we'd either be there on Clyde or on Cumberland Street at the boys' flats, and we'd just be sharing knowledge. Like, oh yeah, you know, this person's going to talk about this oratory, and this person might talk about this, and then obviously you have a few drinks, and then people try and have little competitions on like who can speak, you know, better. But that's really how I started to learn the language, but also not just the language, the culture as well. Growing up, we never knew how to go and formally acknowledge food or formally acknowledge someone's gifting of fine mats and you know, and other cultural things in Samoan culture the right way. You know, and you know, like I said before, or Samoa se atu no umon tofi, meaning everyone has their place. We never grew up knowing that our place was actually to serve by doing the oratory. You know, and so we kind of always relied on our elders to do it for us. But now knowing, shucks, man, we stuffed that up, didn't we? You know, like, holy crap. And so, yeah, at university, that's when, with the boys, I was learning that stuff. And then when I go back, and I remember my first time I spoke formally in front of my family, and it was at Christmas time. I'm not sure if this happens in the Cooks, but when it's Christmas time, Christmas Eve, church groups, they go around and they sing at different people's homes. Is that what they do? Yeah, so in Samoa we call it manuel. And so they go and they sing like carols and hymns and stuff. And then usually someone will stand up and represent the family to thank them. And give them something. And so obviously for us, that year that I did it for the first time, my dad had passed away that year. And he was the one who was used to doing that. That was his role. But all of a sudden, the church were like, oh crap, they've got no one to speak on their behalf. And they started turning around and leaving, you know, like they just finished their singing. They said, Merry Christmas, Manuela Christmas, Mitau Full. They started turning around and leaving. And then that's when I stood up and started speaking. And then even my mum was like, you know, like, what the hell? Where did you learn this from? You know, like, what? Since when? You know, you grew up never knowing how to speak Samoan properly. Never, furthermore, the oratory, the formal oratory that is used by, you know, is te reo rangatira, you know, it's the language of the chiefs. But then you've got this 19-year-old who's not been raised in the culture. All of a sudden he's, you know, speaking on behalf of the family in front of a big congregation and also in front of his siblings and extended family as well. And they were all like, whoa, this is cool. And then for me, there's like a certain thrill, like, you know, there's like a vibe also in your mind and in your heart. You kind of get that fire in your belly. You're like, man, I want to do it again, you know. And then year after year, it would be the same. They'd turn up, they'd sing, and then they'd turn around to leave, and then I'd get up and start speaking. And then I think last year, 2020, was the first time where they knew that I was going to stand and speak. And so they actually stood there, you know. And for me, that's a big statement. You know, they're like, oh yeah, we acknowledge that this person is representing your family now.
Yeah.
And then that's where it started. And then even to this day, I mean, still learning more about the culture.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that I've got like a brother-in-law who's been like a mentor to me.
Very good.
And he's, every time I go home for a holiday, I swear he gets sick of it, but we'll just get a box and just crack open a few beers, and then we'll just start talking randomly about it. And you can see him, he's kind of like, you know, like, here we go again.
Yeah.
But for me, it's kind of reaffirming that, he's accepting that I want to learn. For
sure.
You know, and then he wants to give back as much as he can, because no one's perfect in the culture. And then I can give what I know, and then we kind of, again, that akunga, that reciprocity. And then by the end of the night, when we finished our box, cool, right, off to bed. You know, like, we've learned what we can. And it's funny because that's the story of a lot of people who go to Samoa, who have been fortunate, because I've never been to Samoa before, but people who have gone over and asked the elders for, you know, advice about the cultural stuff.
Yep.
They won't openly talk about it.
Sure.
But if you do like the sneaky, here's $5, you know, or here's a 6-pack, you know, then they start to talk, you know, open up, as you know, after 1 or 2 beers, they start to open up a bit more. And then they start to give you some like nuggets of gold to use as well. And I think that's awesome. I think that's where it starts. Like you were talking about the kava bowl before, how you have a lot of kava, and, you know, there's that talanoa concept,
For sure.
And it's not even just talanoa, but it's also talanoa ako as well, you know, and it's not just one person talks and everyone listens. It's one person talks, one person might connect, and then another person might connect to that person. But it's around that central central object, which is the kava bowl, and the sharing of the one cup as well, you know. Really, really important. And so that's where the journey is now, and obviously culminating with getting my tattoo as well in 2019 in July. So I got tattooed in Invercargill with my sister. Yep. Tough, man. Yeah. Tough, bro. Yeah, real tough. Just one of those journeys that you realize you could be as muscly or as Hulk or as mentally tough as anyone, but if you don't have your family, bro, you know, your whānau, that's where you started. It's going to be tough, man. And it was tough, but I'm so grateful that I had my extended family and my siblings and stuff there as well to help me get through it. And I had my sister as well, who got her tattoo as well, the woman's one, the malu. But for the boys' tattoo, going from the knees right up to the back and rib cage, it's pretty hard out, man. Sure. Pretty hard out.
Because what was it like? Was there something in you that, like, this was the age I was going to get it? Or was there something that just clicked within you when you're just like, I'm taking up all of these different roles. I feel like this is the appropriate time? Or did someone like suggested it to you? Or
it's an awesome question, because before the missionaries arrived in Samoa, a bit of a history lesson.
Yeah, hit us.
It was normal. Like, te tau, the word is obviously a transliteration of tattoo as well. People believe that it's the word that tattoo came from originally. And but also in the Samoan context, it was te tau means either to ring out. So either to to squeeze.
So if you have a cloth or something and you just get to ring out.
And in terms of putting that to the te tau process, that might be the wringing out of the wipes that they use to wipe the excess blood away. It could be the wringing out of all your stamina and endurance and stuff, getting you to a dark mental place. But also te tau means to connect. So te tau le awha mai le itu I maso I lisi itu, so connecting this side to that side of the house. And so for me, it was connecting me from what I had experienced beforehand to a new phase of life. As a servant to the family and the community. But the third meaning that te tau has is it's you're obliged. Right. Like you have to. It was a process that you had to go through. And in the pre-missionary Samoan context, all males had to go through that process. Wow. Yeah. And so it was a way for them to graduate from being a young person, or a young-minded person, to now being an adult and willing to serve. Because it wasn't like you got your tattoo and you became a chief straight away. You got your tattoo, you could therefore enter the house of the chiefs to serve them. And then for the females, it was the malu. It's representative of their role as the shelter for the families. It's them who give birth to the lineage. It's them who carry on the family line, and it is their role as the whiangainga, as the sacred covenant between the male and the female in our culture, the brother and the sister. It's their role to advise the brothers. If the brothers are in qualms, you know, and they're open arms about things, it's always the sister who will advise them and settle things down. Yeah. It's also the sister who might tell them what they need to do. Okay. It's also the sister who might discipline them, you know. And regardless of how young or old you are, you know, and regardless of how old or young you and your siblings and your sister get, she will always be that, you know, the pupil of your eye, you know, the dark place of your eye, that you've got to treat, obviously, very carefully, because the sacred role is her to be your advisor, you know. And so that's what the muddle represents anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
So has it become one of these things where it's almost like a, what would you say, like a colonized thinking to think that you have to earn it?
Yep.
So, yeah, because if you're saying that, you know, it's an obligation, and this is part of your upbringing, everyone's entitled. So if you are Samoan, like, you are entitled to get it. You don't have to, like, go through anything to get it.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. You've hit it on the nose. It's definitely a Western mindset to say you have to earn your way too. Wow. You know, whereas in our culture it was you're either it or not. Yeah. You know, you're either clothed with the la'i or you just lived your life as a naked person, you know, and that was like that was the way that they thought. You know, they didn't used to have anything other than a loincloth, you know, and the what they considered clothing was the tattoo,
for sure,
you know, and for people to walk around, you know, naked with the loincloth, just with bearing their tattoo, that was normal, you know, whereas nowadays it's like, oh, you shouldn't be showing that, you know. Too many what they call muddle police as well. Right. They're like, oh, she shouldn't be showing her muddle off. Okay, right. You know, she's at a beach, she shouldn't be wearing it. You know, oh, she's out in town at nightclub, she shouldn't be wearing a short dress showing her tattoo. But then it's like, oh, so you think it's not okay for that? But then what about the guys who wear short shorts all the time and then, you know, or they'll, you know, they're drunk and they're in the nightclub and they're dancing, they take their tops off and stuff to be arrogant and show it off. You know, they don't say anything about that. You know, but again, there's that gender imbalance and inequality that I feel has been placed on us by the missionaries. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's just a theory of mine, you know. It's like everyone has their own opinions, but in my eyes as an educator of the humanities in my school, trying to teach critical thinking, that's the extent of my critical thinking in that regard. Yeah. And some of them might choose to agree, some of them might disagree, which is fine. But again, that reciprocity to be able to share. Yeah. You know, actually, this is what I think. What do you think now? Yeah. But yeah, it was definitely a process. And so, like, another part of it was when a boy was born, the father would go and start to prepare the ink. Sure. So from the moment they're born and into the world, oh, it's a boy, better go and start to prepare the ink. Yeah. By the time that boy came of an age where the father felt, okay, you are getting tattooed now. Yeah. There was no age, like, it's not an 18-year-old you can go drink or, you know, you could do this. But it was more of a, okay, I've seen my son, he's been serving. You know, he's been serving us. He's really keen to learn a culture. Now it's his time. And that ink that he would have prepared over the many years has been sitting at one end of the house. And then it's a matter of just getting that, putting a bit of water in, mix it around, get ami the tafunga, which is to bring the tafunga to prepare the person to tattoo. Sure. And then off they go. Yeah. Whereas when a girl is born, it's the mother's role to go and start to weave a fine mat for her, or what they call the ear mavaenga, or they might call it what is it? It's pretty much a fine mat where when she gets married. Sure. Yeah. It's the one to kind of. It's the gifting. Yeah. It's kind of like what is it called? What are those called? Like an dowry? A dowry. Yeah. Absolutely. It's not so much a dowry, but it's also like it's more so a mat to acknowledge that this girl was of this woman's body, right? And she's doing this fine mat. So the day that she goes to prepare to have her own family, she's got a mat to go with her. I see. Yeah. Oh, iwhatupu. Iwhatupu was what it's called. But yeah, it was definitely an important part of our culture. Boys born, prepare the ink. Girls born, prepare her fine mat for when she goes to get ready to have her own family. Well, that's that long-term thinking, though. That's like back to everything. So everything that we do is like, we do this now so that in the future this will happen. Like, it serves a purpose somewhere else. Nothing that we do is just like for the sake of doing it. It's like there is a reason behind everything you do. Yeah. But it's until you actually know the history of something, does that actually make sense to you? Yeah. You're totally right, because without having that long vision, I don't think our ancestors would have survived. Oh, absolutely. You know, they just came from Southeast Asia. They just casually went out on their waka into the big open waters beyond the reef, and experienced whatever weather that Rangirue and Papatuanuku threw at them, and Tangaroa had thrown at them as well. But out of no fear, they were fearless, you know. And I think that's a really important part, is that if we are forward thinking, and in Samoan we call it tō whā mamau, which is to, it's to see long, and also to see ahead, be ahead. I think if our ancestors didn't have that, we wouldn't survive. Yeah.
And some of what you've been talking about, especially with your preparation going into school and stuff, and I know that's what you'll be getting into in a couple of weeks. That's kind of it seems like that's the same energy that you bring in to your classroom as well, trying to stay ahead with what you're doing, but also like with an eye of where you've been and where you are now. So it's like taking all of those different times into perspective and then being able to put something forward. Yeah,
you're so right, because like I actually caught up with I arrived in the city yesterday, and my partner wasn't very happy that I went to see my colleague already. A few hours after landing in the capital. And then so I went to see my colleague, and for me it was like a chance just to let rip. Like I've had all these ideas over the summer. The last few weeks I've been in Invercargill, I've been writing up in my diary, I've been planning up events and writing docs online, and gave the ideas, but out of not so much of to say, look how organised I am, but look more so to say, hey, this is the year ahead of us, if we want to, because we had an amazing year last year at our school, new teachers, new principal, new senior management, new culture, things are starting to change at our school, a new vibe, roles growing this year, and we wanted to better that, like people, a lot of the old side of our school might say, oh, it's a bit hard, it's a bit in the too hard basket, don't bother. Whereas for us, our principal, he can see far, he's got that tō whā mamau, where he can, say, sit you down and go, hey, Troy, in a few years, it might not be this year, might not be next year, but in a few years we see the sports side of our school coming to life. If we can get the sport right, because all of our kids, they've got a passion for sports. If we can link that into that side of their lives, the whole school will be right. And he's got that vision, and everyone's like, oh yeah, whatever. But for us who have really bought into that kaupapa from the moment we were interviewed to the moment we accepted the job, and even our mahi we did last year, he kind of sat us down at the end of the year and said, yep, we had an amazing year, but we can be better. And we're like, yep, we know. It's just the starting block, just to get a feel of the school, and also just to tap into that. Okay, where to now? We're in the bigger picture. Are we heading now? Are we gonna go straight up the middle of the mountain to the top, or are we gonna go across the mountain to the next base, set up camp for another year, and then keep going?
Sure.
As you talked about earlier. But it's really important in teaching that we're ahead. You know, we're thinking ahead, like some of the kids who are year 8, year 9 now. We're already thinking by the time they get to year 12, 13, like you have to be, or else if you don't see them in that capacity, by the time they get to that point, there are going to be a whole bunch of surprises that you're going to be like, oh shit, we weren't ready for this. Whereas it's crack up because you can actually read kids from a young age. And like, yes, they are in their formative phase, from year 7 being 11 years old up to when they're 15, 16 and they start to cement themselves in their worldviews. They're impressionable still.
For sure.
Regardless of how formative they are and how, grounded in their own worldviews they are, they are still open to impressions. And if you can slowly chip away at them, by the time they become leaders of the school, man, you've got some chiefs in your school.
Absolutely.
And then all of a sudden the power sharing goes away from the teachers. And it's more, all right, it's your school. You take charge, An assembly, they're not going to do what students have done in the past. Oh, what are we doing today? They would have been like, okay, this is what we're doing today. You're doing this, delegate, whereas we might even be part of that delegation. They might go, all right, mister, can you get up and do this? Sweet, man. Thanks for telling me, and that's the point where we want to get our kids. And that should be the point of a student's life that we should be all trying to get towards, with our kids all across the country. But obviously, things have happened in the past, and obviously the education system has been very grounded in its own way for a very long time in New Zealand. But now it's changing.
For sure.
And obviously, like with the new Pacific Education Plan that they released last year, it's awesome, bro. Like the extra funding going in towards the supporting of language programs, the supporting of Māori and Pasifika programs for IT, for initial teacher education, get more Māori Pasifika teachers. And then those two things together will help to lift the achievement and raise the profile of our communities, but people think, they need to know more. It's like they already know enough.
Absolutely.
You know, it's how can we tap into that wealth of knowledge that the kids have to kind of lift the profile of themselves.
For sure.
And then eventually the school, eventually the community, the wider community, then eventually the country, and then our stats will be amazing.
There's a flow-on effect from everything. And just one thing you touched on was just you're building leaders who will end up going back. Most of them will go back to wherever they have come from to be able to like just keep that cycle going of like building and building and building. And I remember one thing, I think it was might have been my PE teacher. I remember what he said to me was like, they won't remember what you told them, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. Yeah. So that's like my second to last question before we get into the final one that I ask everyone. But that's just like, what type of environment as like the young Samoan male that you are going into your classrooms, what's that like environment that you want people to feel when you're in there?
Yeah, that's a really tough question.
Yeah.
I think in terms of environment, si'o is the word in Samoa, but it changes all the time. For sure. And so like just as much as the weather changes, the environment's going to change. Yeah. But there's a new thing that we're doing at school. It's called relationship-based learning. Cool. We've got a facilitator, awesome facilitator, Lorraine Zaffa, who travels the country facilitating stuff in this kaupapa. But in terms of our school, it's got to be whānau like. Yeah. It's got to be family like. If you can't share a laugh, if you can't give a grilling, if you can't let them give you a grilling, if you can't banter, if you can't get in close with one another and actually share that space, then it's never going to work. Sure. Like if you're too much of that, stand up at the front, I'm the dictator, you listen to me, what I say is the law, it's never going to work. And I think that's what's happened for too long. I mean, all we have to do is go into New Zealand's dark history. For sure. When education first started here in Aotearoa and the way that mission schools were set up, the way that tangata whenua were managed in those schools, where the language was nullified. Absolutely. Where the culture was put to the side, where they were told to wear Western and European clothing, where they were told to speak English, a language that was foreign to them, where they were told to live by foreign values. It's never going to work. And the fact that I can't believe that that's been since the 1800s. Yeah. To this day. Yeah. Some people are still doing it. Absolutely. Yeah, so that's over 200 years, bro. Like of the same style. Teacher knows everything. You shush, listen. Yeah. And then after our time's done, then go away. Yeah. And even that whole mission mindset of we're going to put your culture to the side. You're going to learn our one, because apparently it's the only way. But in terms of our context, bro, whānau is important, you know. And if we not only make it whānau for the kids, but also making it reciprocal for families as well. Yeah. And so feeling free to, because a lot of people these days, with advances in technology, parent-teacher interviews, especially for our community, have become like disciplinary hearings. Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. But it shouldn't be about that. Like, there should be no surprises about disciplinary. Like, no parent-teacher interview should be about, sometimes your kid can get distracted. Yeah. It should always be, this is the achievement, this is the mahi that they've done so far. How do you feel? Do you have any questions? Awesome. If you have anything, come see me. And that's what you have the whole year to do, is to connect with the families.
There's open communication the whole time.
Whereas too many, a lot of old school practitioners will just send the email, if you have anything, just come see me, but won't follow it up. Absolutely. They won't follow it up with a call home. They won't follow it up with a visit to the house if they feel safe enough to. Yeah. They won't follow it up with a, hey, do you have your parents' number? I'm going to give them a call. And like actually talk to the kids and make them feel like, oh crap, like this teacher's on my case. Because once you got them thinking like that, then as soon as they enter your class or that si'o manga of school, bro, it's a breeze. Yeah. And that's the goal. And we're still obviously lifelong learners, we are. And we're still trying to learn the best way to do it. But we've got this kaupapa at school called Sotanga. Cool. Which means to, obviously, like to tell, is to bring things together. Yep. But Sotanga is kind of more like connection. Yep. And connecting families to school, to the kid, like it's putting the kid at the center, bringing the family on one side, bringing the school on one side, and then eventually having a common ground. Yeah. And then being able to leave, right, do you guys feel all right? Cool. If you feel anything, get in contact with your teacher who was sitting listening, get in touch with us if you want to connect with the school, or just pop in whenever, and you want it to get to that point. Yeah. And that's what you want your classrooms to be like, for sure. Where you just connect with them straight away. And obviously the first thing to connecting is, they look like me. Yeah. They sound like me. Yeah. They understand me. Yeah. But yeah, that's that.
It's cool, man. And so before I get into my final question that I ask everyone, I just have to say, like, it's just awesome to see that you have that sort of passion. Like someone your age who could be, you could still be focusing on your footy, you could still be, kind of focusing on yourself, but like that purpose in you to make wherever you are, like at least give them the tools to be able to like become someone like yourself or go off and lead wherever it is. Like that's kind of just opened your eyes to the fact that there are people out there who continue to do this all the time, and we just like don't get that opportunity to get it out there. So the final question that I ask everyone is just, what is something that you do every day or close to every day that helps you feel like you have optimized your day? Like a habit or a routine?
Yeah. No, that's a really good question. I have two things.
Yeah.
I always go to the gym.
Good.
And then the second one is I always grab coffee.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Teachers, coffee is our water. It's our bread and butter, man. Like if a teacher doesn't have their coffee, you should see the staff room. Like just everyone's going crazy interval and lunchtime trying to get their coffee. But for me, like the physical well-being is really important.
For sure.
And so if we want the kids, you know, because I coach rugby, and so if we want the kids to be fit and be built and obviously be able to hold themselves physically in a game of rugby, we've obviously got to be an example for them as well.
Sure.
You know what we talked about earlier?
Yeah.
But sorry, I'll keep it brief. But also like just coaches, there are too many coaches out there who will just demand, bark.
Yep.
But then won't actually do it themselves.
Absolutely.
You know? And so if you're going to preach, you better like follow that belief as well.
For sure.
That trade of thought. But yeah, those are the two things. Gym in the morning, because I'm a morning person.
Sure.
And then grab a coffee, and then that's my day started off well.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Man, it's been so good having you on chatting. It honestly feels like we've known each other for ages, but we just went through everything, and I appreciate your honesty through everything and your ability to be able to reflect on all of your practice, but then also your humility and being able to like identify where you've needed to be better and where because that's the thing, we're lifelong learners, and if we can see that as the journey and the process of everything, then we're more likely to achieve close to where we need to be. So thank you so much for coming on, brother. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for obviously the invite, but also just showing a passion on our little corner of the world.
Man, love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Cheers, bro.
Thanks, bro.